Welcome everyone to today's webinar. We appreciate your attendance and your willingness to make the time to be involved in the Tier 4 webinar series. We're very excited about the panelists that we have today and excited to get a little bit more insight into some of the things that we're all looking at in 2020. Wanted to give a quick reminder that there will be an opportunity for Q&A, and if you'd like to, give a question, there's a chat box at the bottom, and we can kind of address those questions throughout the program today. I would like to give a special introduction to each of our panelists. We've got Byron Nash, the CITO of OrthoBanc, Jason James, the CIO of NetHealth, and David Giambruno, the CEO of Nucleaus. And each one of them we're very, very lucky to have. I'm actually going to start by allowing each one of them to give about 30 seconds to introduce themselves, and then we'll jump into the program. Byron, we'll start with you, and then Jason, and then David.
Okay, I'm Byron Nash, as was already noted. I'm the CITO for OrthoBanc. OrthoBanc is the leading provider for payment management services for orthodontic and dental treatment. We also service the veterinary industry, and very happy to be here. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jason James, JJ. I'm CIO of NetHealth. NetHealth is headquartered in Pittsburgh. I live here in Atlanta. We focus on SaaS solutions for the healthcare industry. We focus on the continuum of care, everything from the hospital to the home.
David Giambruno, CEO of Nucleaus, former CIO, CTO, CISO of like Revlon, Shutterstock, Tribune Media. Saw a problem about a couple of years ago, and we're kind of seeing it now, where the world was turning to code. And so we want to help secure the world's code. We figured out how to scan every piece of code on the world continuously and tell you how to fix it.
Thank you. I appreciate the introductions and certainly the insight that you're willing to share with us today and making the time. We want to jump into the questions and thoughts that we have around today. I think it's safe to say that all businesses have seen some sort of shift in priorities and roadmap in 2020. This is, of course, heightening the challenge that IT decision leaders are having in maintaining, smooth operations and maintaining the solutions that they have. And through this whirlwind, we'd love to hear a little bit about how you've adapted some strategies around that, and certainly your executive experience and how you've kind of navigated the challenges of these last few months. Starting off, we'd like to have a question around some of the primary shifts that we've seen. What have been the primary shifts that you've had to make this year within your organization? We'll start with David, and then Byron, and then Jason. So David?
So really two things. The first, and I affectionately call it bubble wrapping, right? So as everybody went remote, we all had these standards and things inside of our corporations. And my feeling was always, you kind of bubble wrap everybody so they can't hurt themselves from a cybersecurity perspective. And so what's happened to, we've had to extend that bubble wrapping to everybody at home to make sure everybody's secure given the number of attacks that come up. The second big thing is really around the network has now become the epicenter of the world again, right? So, we're all remote. You kind of see, some of the different people changes, training issues, but really making sure that everybody's got the right connectivity to share and work remotely and collaborate.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Byron?
And for us, it's really been around changing our culture to more of an agile, product-oriented culture. That shift began before COVID-19, but the pressure on the orthodontics and dental industry, especially with the shutdown and the restart, really speeded up the need for us to bring solutions to market much faster.
For us, it's one of the things that we were fortunate in a sense that we had already embraced this idea of being a remote empowered workforce. Me, like so many people, I didn't foresee global pandemic, but I did foresee the need of people to work not only effectively remotely, but also securely. And so what it enabled us to do is, we pivoted very quickly. In fact, we We moved the entire operation on Friday the 13th in March to remote only. We've been remote only since. It caused us to actually accelerate any projects that would enable users to work more effectively remotely. So one of the projects we actually had in flight was a project between Tier4 and one of your partners, and it was a UCaaS solution. And we actually had been going down that road, and we actually accelerated that adoption and deployment by a little more than a month to bring that to bear, so we could enable people to more effectively communicate and work together. The idea is work is no longer a place but a thing, and so we wanted to give people the tools to effectively communicate, whether they were in their home office, their back deck, wherever they would be. And it's definitely allowed us to look at not only the solutions we have, but how do people work and how do people communicate? You know, the thing about COVID that, you know, people talk about it being the biggest societal impact since World War II. It's also the biggest and most impactful driver of digital acceleration ever.
Yeah, with the acceleration is kind of a follow-up question here. Has that been accepted well within, you know, the IT organization, the organization at large, or has it caused, you know, struggles or issues with you? Ultimately, has it been more of a positive or a negative for your organizations?
For us, it's been a positive. I think the CEO asked me 2 weeks in, after we all went remote, why am I paying for our 20,000 square foot building?
Yeah, it's one of the jokes I've had with a bunch of my peers is, you know, should we all be short? You know, I'm not saying anything, but might want to short that, you know, commercial real estate market pretty soon. As you see the changes stop to happen. I mean, one of the things that we worked really hard with is the idea of being frictionless. So, you know, we focus from a product perspective to make product frictionless, but a ton more focus went into the internal processes of making sure everybody could work in a frictionless fashion, that it was easy. And, you know, for us, we saw essentially a twofold event. One was, you know, people worked a lot more, and, you know, as a leader, I had to like make sure, like, I pay attention to when people were working when they're on, because you're way more visible to each other, right? In a way, and it's really making sure people are focused, they're executing, but not working 24 hours a day. The second piece of that is accelerate a ton of our product development because people were focused. You know, one of the jokes we had, there's no more drive-bys, right? Mm-hmm. And it forced people to think and communicate a little bit more clearly on requirements and what people want. The irony with customers, we actually got to spend more time with customers because they were easily accessible. It's kind of like an unintended consequence, but it turned out really well. And then just as a third thing, and I kind of remind, even though it's a horrible thing, we'll probably look back at this in a generation or so, right? And it's one of those times you'll never have more time with your family, right? So as an upside, being able to share time with my daughter and, right, have fun and do things. And then, you know, we kind of all joked offline that, you know, we're running out of home projects to do as well.
Sure.
Yeah. Off of David's point, you know, you can't undervalue or underestimate how this has changed the home life, right? You know, it's not that we're working at home, it's that we're living at work, right? This idea is there's this convergence of the two. As IT leaders and as leaders in general, you have to be able to measure that. Is it effective? Are people effectively working remotely? Are they working too long? You know, a lot of studies are showing that people are working 11 hours now. And so as a data-driven organization, we're looking at our data. We're looking at what do ticket response times look like? What do number of tickets opened and closed and JIRA stories, right? What do they look like? People are working like crazy. And so we've been taking a very mindful approach of working with our talent and working with our teams to ensure that they are taking the time, that they are taking the breaks, that they're still taking PTO, right? Even though you can't go anywhere safely, so to speak, that doesn't mean you shouldn't be taking that time, vacating that spot, so to speak. And so it's important to measure that. And we've been measuring that. It's been effective in the sense that people, you know, especially if you're in the Atlanta market, what commute, right? You know, it takes, you know, a few seconds to walk down the hall. I was if I would head to my office in Alpharetta, some days it would take an hour and a half. Well, I could also be on a plane and be in the Pittsburgh office in an hour and a half. And so being able to get back that time and be with my team, and like David said, be with my family. You know, I've got, you know, a young daughter, and being able to get, you know, take a lunch break and go downstairs and spend time with her. It's, you know, it's been amazing. There's been terrible things about this pandemic. Make no mistake. You know, over 140,000 lives lost in America alone. Terrible things, but there have been societal changes that will be long-term societal changes, right? Societal shifts. You know, there'll be millions of Americans that never go back into a traditional office Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. You know, they may come back in, but once people understand that they have that flexibility, more time with their family, the ability to not sit in horrendous traffic with commutes, the more they'll realize maybe the old norm wasn't right. You know, everybody's using the term the new norm, or what is the new norm, but it's not to say that the way things were working may have been normal, but it doesn't mean they were right.
Yeah, these great points here, you know, and really kind of leads into the follow-up question. Naturally, you know, with these shifts, as Jason mentioned, you know, probably the biggest shift since World War II, you know, things are exposed, right? And even, you know, things that we naturally may not have been right in the first place and had come in, so to speak. But within organizations, you know, these gaps are found, you know, through these type of shifts in the needs of the organization. Has your, you know, IT department, has the IT solutions been able to be, you know, been able to ultimately cover those gaps for you in an accelerated fashion, or has that caused some angst within the organization to really get those things done? Maybe I'll start with Byron on this one, and then Jason, and then David.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that I came to OrthoBanc about 2.5 years ago, and we realized that there was a need to modernize our platforms. So we set out on a 3-year strategic plan. And about a year ago, we started buying new platforms to rebuild our systems. And what began to happen, what we saw were trends, I think, just sped up. One of the ones is that, you know, in the orthodontics and dental industry, there was a lot of, you know, very traditional, go to an office, go to an appointment, sit in a room with a bunch of people that you can't do anymore, right? And so during the shutdown, a lot of those offices were trying to think of ways to come back online, and teledentistry, which had started kind of in its infancy, really began to just take off. Well, what that did for us was that suddenly people are not coming to the office, and we found practices coming to us and say, can you help us with patient onboarding? We need to do it in a way that where they don't have to come to the office. And so we started using e-sign solutions that we already had to put together the workflow and a way to onboard the patient before they ever even set foot in the office. And we've seen other things like that as well, that you get to a, you know, we want no-touch solutions. They want to be able to do text to pay or pay their bill without ever going inside the office. And so I think one of the things is we're beginning to realize some of the value that we made in investing in low-code platforms, that we're able to deliver those types of solutions in weeks instead of months.
Yeah, and sort of to Byron's point, you know, again, this is COVID-19 being a driver of digital acceleration and digital transformation. And so for us, you know, there are a lot of things on the roadmap. You know, Byron talked about telehealth in a dental setting. Well, we have various aspects of the continuum of care, everything from hospice to wound care to home health to acute care. And so for us, we had telehealth being integrated into our product that was on a multi-year roadmap. What that meant was we didn't have multi-years anymore. We've got multi-weeks at best. And so we were able to look at not only solutions that we had created, but also partners that were out there, CMS sort of relaxed the reins, so to speak, on what you could use. And it would be everything from FaceTime to Zoom. What we didn't want to do, we didn't want to partner with a solution that was sort of shimmied in, right? A solution that could be used and was temporarily approved, and then you would have to get people back off that solution with a long-term secured approach. We didn't take that approach. Our approach was, if we're going to accelerate this, what do we put in that could be used in the future that was secure, that was scalable, and that met the demands of our clients? What Byron's talking about is, again, a societal shift. You know, we as technology leaders implemented this in a very rapid fashion. But what it meant from a client perspective is that they are changing how they get healthcare. You know, I think about how I got an annual checkup, and it was just something minor, right? It wasn't that I needed blood work or anything. Well, what that showed was that response was so positive. Why in the hell would I drive across town, wait in a lobby with a bunch of sick people for 30 minutes to get that done when it could be done from the comfort of my own house? So the idea is this idea of an ever-present world of being able to do things virtual will continue to accelerate. I mean, if you think about how you get groceries, how many people in this meeting have gotten groceries through Instacart or Shipt in the last 4 months, right? How many of you have gotten food from DoorDash or Uber in the last 4 months? That stuff's not going away. The reason why Uber Eats or Uber bought Postmates for over $1 billion was the idea is, how do you expand that? Any solution where you can give somebody back time has immense value. If you think about how we operated 40 years ago, and I wasn't working 40 years ago, but 40 years ago, and you were sending out memos, right? And you had a secretary, and you'd have to tell your secretary what to do. None of us do that anymore, right? The idea is you can, a lot of us write even less emails now because of Slack and texting. Anytime you can introduce a disruptive technology that gives people back time, it doesn't go away. The idea is, I need more time, right?
Can I just comment on that real quick?
Sure.
Please.
So basic human psychology, right? You need 6 weeks to create a new habit. And kind of what you're saying, Jason, right, is the same thing. Two things have happened. What people have created new habits because they've had to, and people have become way less afraid of technology now, right? Like, I can't tell you how many comments I get, right? Because, you know, we're all in IT, we're all with the family help desk, right? And, you know, the irony of that is, older in-laws, can I do this? Is this okay? And then once they do it, they're like, oh my God, I got food, right? This is awesome. Yeah. Right. And so you get that shift, and then it's reinforced. So, you know, there's these macro changes that it's not going to go back anymore. I agree with that. You know, once the habit's done, unless something else counteracts that habit, it's going to stay. Right. And I'll jump in here. You know, when you kind of, you know, I'm going to talk about this later, but IDC kind of came out with a report just a little while ago talking about the Pacific Rim, and that by 2025, 50% of the revenue for all companies in the Pacific Rim is going to be coming through digital channels. Think about the effect of that. That's enormous, right? And we're seeing that, and I'll talk about that a little bit more later. I've got some great data on the shift because I see it at a macro level. But kind of three things that, you know, we always think about and the shifts that are happening. One is the idea of real time. Everything we're doing is shifting real time. So, you know, as a CISO, security is going from point in time to all the time, right? That's a huge metric, which puts a set of responsibility on the companies. And I call it bubble wrapping, but to make sure everybody's okay, right? It's not just taking care of the person, but making sure they're safe while they're working. We're not losing information, all of those things. And then kind of what everybody else has alluded to is, you know, the product life cycle is, like you said, is not measured in years anymore. The iterations, right? And this is kind of another habit thing. You know, we kind of got used to iterations on our phones and everything, you know, seeing the updates on apps every week, or, you know, depending how many out of your phone you're downloading forever. But the same idea is coming to products where people are now expecting continuous improvement in their experiences over and over. And that becomes, how well you do that becomes a real competitive differentiator, right? I mean, it does, and the timelines are just shrinking.
Yeah, great points. I like to reinforce what you said, that it's interesting. Our organizations are obviously have gaps in things that we're trying to work through, but in reality, it's the end user, it's the customer and how they're adapting to this world that we now live in, that we now need to adapt to ourselves as our organization and make sure that we're giving them ultimately the solution that they need to be, continuous customers and end users. That's a fascinating point.
I used to, as a CIO, I used to carry an IBM Selectric typewriter. I used to always have one in my office because my joke, and obviously you can probably tell from my personality, right? I'm willing to do things. I'd be like, you want to cut the budget? And I'd put the IBM typewriter on the desk. I mean, like, I'm happy, I'll buy the whiteout, right? And I think what we're seeing also is this new focus on technology, that everything is now running on it. And the way we look at it, and is the whole world is now starting to run on code. Everything you do is running on code. I used to joke about the only place you could go was the bathroom that didn't run on code, and then Kohler created the smart toilet, and so that's over. Yeah, but it is literally everything is moving onto code, and that creates enormous opportunity as well as management. You have to pay attention to it because the permutations in code is complex, and product expectations, and now we've got two big customers, right? We're trying to keep everybody working as well as supporting the revenue side of the business.
Great point there. Naturally, we hear about digital transformation all the time, and in having that play with COVID-19, of course, has been interesting to watch. Do you feel like COVID-19 has forced digital transformation? And if so, how? Let's start with Jason, and then I'll go Byron and David from there.
I don't think it's necessarily forced digital transformation. I think it's focused digital transformation, right? The idea of what's important. So as technical leaders, we all had a to-do list. Now we got a to-don't list. What am I not going to do, right? How am I going to focus what needs to be done? How am I enabling employees to work effectively, with high productivity, securely from anywhere? How am I enabling them to connect, right? So when four walls don't matter anymore, what are you doing to build your culture? What are you doing to make sure people are communicating? And by the way, communicating in ways that have nothing to do with work, because that's what builds advocacy. That's what builds a level of professional regard and professional relationships that can grow. And I think for us, we were an organization that was spread out throughout the United States. Our office, we've been fortunate, we have not cut any employees during all this. We've been doing very well financially. We actually acquired an organization during all this. And so for us, what we wanted to do, we decided that COVID would also make us more culturally relevant. And that might be everything from building out groups like Women in Technology at work. It was like having open discussions with minorities regarding what did Black Lives Matters mean to them. And so what it did for an organization, not only did it shift our need to focus on technology, it shifted our need to focus on our people and what importance of jobs meant to them. Because let me tell you, right now, no organization in the world is landing employees because they got a real kick-ass campus. Nobody cares, right? If you look at Google, they've already told their employees they don't need to return until at the earliest July of 2021. These offices aren't relevant anymore. Your cool snacks, your pool tables, your foosball machines, none of that matters, right? But what is mattering to employees? Are you keeping them safe? Are you giving them opportunities to grow? Are you giving them a chance to be creative and expressive? And so when you look at the digital transformation, yeah, that's important. But now what we're seeing is a cultural transformation. And so now how, as a technical leader, are you using those technologies to define and grow your culture when four walls don't matter anymore?
One of the other side effects, and kind of to tag on what Jason, it's a lot of how you make people feel, right? I love Maya Angelou's quote, right? Just basically ends, people don't remember anything except for how you made them feel. The second part is, I spent a lot of time as the CIO of Revlon and did some really cool things, but, even back then we were, driving digital transformation, and coming from a factory, and even today working with teams, is the people are becoming your factories. right? The people that build the code and test it and the whole ecosystem around that. And so it's really important that you treat that factory well, right? That they are people and that this stuff is not easy. And that's been one of the things that, like, you know, again, kind of what we talked about, paying how much are people working, or, you know, we're not worried about getting their stuff done. It's literally, are you happy? Are you having a good time? Are you challenged, right? You know, are things good? And I think when you do that, right, people gravitate, and, you know, people work hard, not because, you know, they want to, it's because they love to. And when you can give them a great place to work, it's amazing what people can get done.
I was going to say, I think Jason's point about focus, I think we were kind of on this process of digital transformation before COVID. You know, when I first came to OrthoBanc, we have a call center that we operate here in Chattanooga, and the whole concept that I would order laptops for the entire call center staff so they could go home in a weather emergency and take calls was kind of foreign to our group. But when I put the laptops in place, our call center manager started allowing some people to go home and work on a limited basis. And really our whole plan was that if we have snow in Chattanooga, which is a disaster here, that the people could go home for a couple of days. Well, I think what this did is that we were able to go ahead and say, you know, wow, if they can do it, anybody can do it. And then the next step was, especially when we saw the pandemic and the shutdown coming, starting in March, we went through and said, what is it that we do here in the office that we have to do at home? And there were some things in the accounting department and some payment processing that people had to be on site for, that we managed to get changed over so that it could be done from anywhere. And I think the investments we made in the past actually paid dividends right now. I don't think any of us ever thought that we would be out this long. And I really have kind of a special story here, because right in April, we had an F4 tornado go through Chattanooga, and it leveled one side of the city. And a lot of our employees worked over there. So we had to respond not only to COVID, but we had to help these employees who were not able to work from home or may not even have a home now, get to a new location and get set up. And it put a lot of strain on my team, but everyone responded well. And I would also say that I think that COVID I think it just put everyone kind of in the mode of, hey, we have to survive. And I think that focused a lot of people. And I'd say in our company, now we know the value of technology has been proven through this, and how important it is going to be moving forward.
That's excellent. Oh, great thoughts here, and appreciate our audience is kind of weaving in some questions here. We're going to kind of bring those in as we go through the process. I do want to get specific real quick, because we know, once again, a lot of our audience today and those that will listen to this are going through some very often traumatic shifts in their organization. And so I'd like to get a little bit more specific for you and tactical even. What was the first shift that you made? Maybe what point did you implement that shift, and what are some changes that you've seen come from implementing, you know, these necessary shifts for you in your organization? So David, and then Jason and Byron, if you guys want to handle this one, I'd appreciate it.
I mean, the first shift for us was really the network became the epicenter of the world again. And so for us, it was really making sure everybody had the appropriate bandwidth, right? I mean, we're a product company. And so making sure everybody can work and, you know, submit code and keep the product developing as well as customer interaction. So basically, the first thing we did is we bought everybody business class, you know, cable, right? So no outages, increased everybody's bandwidth to the most that, you know, they could have wherever they are. And the drive was really making sure that everybody could work seamlessly without having to think about it. You know, the second thing was, you know, deploying essentially what we call the bubble wrapping around everybody to make sure that everybody was secure. You know, we're a bunch of security nerds, right? So, you know, everybody's watching all the attacks on their houses and what's going on. And so it was pretty clear pretty quickly to, you know, to protect ourselves. And so those were really the two major things. And the driver was keep everybody working and, you know, working with customers.
Yeah, for us, you know, when we talk about that shift and pivoted, we shifted to fully remote Friday, March 13th, right? And so much like David talked about, the network became way more relevant than ever before, right? You know, so that required infrastructure staff to check things, right? Did we need to upgrade bandwidth in certain areas? Did we need to, you know, if you look at the service desk, you know, never before were they supporting people's home networks. And so now they had to go in and work with security to make sure those, you know, had everything from updated firmware to, did they need to work with them to replace, you know, Wi-Fi access points at home? Did we have to drop in a couple of hotspots until some bandwidth could get upgraded? And so we had to have a much more deeper understanding of how our users work when they're not at work, so to speak. And so for us, it was, you know, we had to pivot to be a lot more customer facing in a way, because instead of our customers being our clients, we're talking about customers being our users, right? And all of a sudden they're coming to us and going, okay, do I need the VPN to get on this part of access? Do I not? And we also looked at solutions and tried to make them as frictionless as possible. You know, people are already going through a lot. You know, I'm lucky, I have a dedicated home office, but people were making makeshift offices at their dinner table or in their bedroom. And so the one thing I told my team, as well as I've told other leaders, the one soft skill every leader needs right now is really flexibility. You know, at any point on this call, somebody could be mowing a lawn outside, right? Or a thunderstorm could come out and knock out the power. It's a very different world. And so the one thing you also have to pivot to is pivot to a point of better empathy, right? And understanding things aren't going to go perfect. And somebody's kid's going to walk in. You know, how many parents are educating their kids or trying to educate their kids? And, you know, we're about to resume school and nobody knows what that looks like. And so one of the fastest pivots we had to do, aside from, you know, being there and supporting from a software perspective, is we all had to act almost as technological therapists, right? Tell me what the problem is. You know, how can I help you? How can I, you know, have empathy and get you through this? Because you know what? There's a lot of crazy stuff going on. And I get it. You know, your kids and dogs are barking in your 2-bedroom apartment. And, you know, you still got to get on the call with a client. And how does that work? And so, you know, we also use that time to focus our soft skills and retrain our people into what does it mean to be a more humanistic side of IT.
I would agree with everything that's been said so far, but I think one of the things our company found was that we became an advisor to our customers. There was a lot of fear about what the economy tanking would mean with the shutdown. And since we are a payments company, we actually manage the cash flow for a lot of the orthodontists that we serve. And a lot of them were ready to just say, you know what, don't collect any payments for the next month and a half, 2 months. And we were able to provide advice to them, explaining that you probably shouldn't just shut down your payments. Let people make that decision. We'll work with you on when people do have a problem making their payments because of the shutdown. But we think that overall you're going to still continue to see the majority of your customers make their payments. And I think that was, we were taking the load off somebody before. Now we're not only taking the load off, but helping them understand how to manage their cash flow.
Thanks, guys. Can you hear me okay? I'm having a little problem with my Ring Central connectivity. Everyone hear me all right?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yep. All right. Well, my screen may have jumped off, but we'll proceed. Had some really good questions come in from some of our panelists, or excuse me, 4 panelists from some individuals. One of which was talking about kind of the ROI budget for your 2021 budget, and how you're going about kind of how shifts have occurred with ROI calculations. Are you guys considering vendor consolidations? Even increased visibility because staff is remote. Are those some of the shifts that you're trying to capture in this process? So I'd open that up for any of you to respond to.
So from a focus, so my head of engineering, he has a new moniker above his desk. If we can't automate it, we don't need it. And so part of what we're doing is, as turning around and facing forward and focusing on revenue producing, right, and shifting that to product as much as you can. What we're doing and what I see a lot of my peers doing is literally, it's all about automation. Automate everything you can, and then enable the teams to turn around and face forward. So you're not having to make decisions around operations. From a budget perspective, it is, how do we, essentially compress or optimize from a vendor perspective? But we're also seeing the shift to more, essentially SaaS-based with the experience. So it's not in your world, right? It makes the user experience. What it does drive is really a set around identity management, access control. As we see that converging heavily. In my particular world, we're seeing massive explosion in code growth. We went to scanning a couple billion lines of code a day to 30 billion for our clients. I mean, it's amazing when you see what's happening inside the digital world.
Yeah, from a CIO perspective, the last few years, all the focus has been on digital transformation. Because we're in a deep recession, whether people realize it or not, there'll be a massive focus on cost optimization, whether you're doing well or not. The idea is, from a vendor standpoint, are they cutting it? Are they really a partner? When we talk about consolidation, it comes from the sense that, maybe you had solutions that didn't work. During all this, we consolidated, with the help of Tier4, we consolidated 5 disparate phone systems, 3 disparate web conferencing solutions to one that's by far more frictionless. And so in doing that, not only were there massive cost optimizations, there was a much better user experience. And so CIOs are going to be heavily looking at, and are looking at, I know we are, where's the spend? Does that spend empower the employee, right? Because who knows what that looks like. Again, we talked about it. There'll be large portions that never return to an office, right? How do we make them as effective as possible? David talked about automation. Many organizations are looking at automation, whether it be, RPA or other forms of machine learning. And that idea is, within the next 5 years, even a significant part of my own workforce will be non-human labor. That idea is, we're not replacing people. What we're doing is automating them out of redundant tasks, right? If I can take my talent pool, whether it be in finance or IT or other departments, and take these repetitive tasks and automate them in a way, now we can upskill them. Now we can reskill them on stuff that not only grow their career, but also change the ultimate trajectory of the company.
Yeah, I would say that cost optimization is the route we're going, not cost cutting, but optimization. Getting on single platforms instead of having multiple platforms that do pieces of something. Try to get a single platform. We've invested in a low-code platform, and all our development will be done there. We've invested in just things that support a mesh application architecture. I do think that automation, that people are going to look to IT for automation, to, in our case, not to shrink the number of employees, but to not have to grow the employees as the business grows. And so I think there will be a lot of focus there, but I've had more of the problem that the owners are looking for ways to invest more money to grow our digital platforms. So and they have not shown any reluctance to do that. They think this is a time to be growing the digital platforms, not shrinking them.
Great. Great insight there. Hitting around more of the remote workforce. Obviously, that's the world we're in now. At what point did your organizations ultimately make that decision? Did they kind of lag behind that? And then even, is that something that, you are trying to get back to? I know we've hit around some, area of what your organizations are doing, but maybe talk about those specifics around how you're approaching, your remote workforce, and maybe even a little bit more detail around, do you still see productivity, the remote team's health? Is it going well? And, is this potentially a permanent and long-term thing, or something that you think you'll circle back and get back to normal? So I know that's been hit on some degree here, but I'd like some more insight there. We'll start with Jason, and then Byron, and then David.
Sure. We had been monitoring what was happening not only in Asia, but in Europe, and, working with local authorities and working with guidance from CDC. We decided on March 13th, and I'll remember that day because it's Friday 13th, that we were going to pivot the entire organization remote. We had a lot of metrics on what it meant to be a remote workforce. We had almost 40% of our employees spread out throughout the United States. And what that meant is, with that, they didn't report into a traditional office. So that meant we pivoted the other 60% to remote. Since then, we've decided this is the new norm going forward. We've been working with leases and departments, and so we've already notified certain employees. There'll be certain offices that don't reopen. We're going full bore. We've taken a Twitter-esque approach. If you want to return to an office when it's deemed safe, you can. If you don't, you won't. As a CIO, when it is safe, I will fly into certain locations, but my office here in Alpharetta, I've chosen to give it up. I have no desire to sit in traffic and be stuck every day, losing an hour and a half on the front end and the back end. I don't choose to live where I work. I choose to live where I want to, right? And so that way we're encouraging employees to do the same. How has it affected our talent? We've been able to recruit for this. We're no longer recruiting talent where an office is. We're recruiting talent where they live, right? The idea is it's more important to get the right talent and people that can do the job versus where they live or where we live. And so through all this, we've been fortunate. We've had 0 layoffs, right? We've hired. We haven't hired at the accelerated growth that we had planned at the beginning of the year, but we're still hiring. From a mobile standpoint, we had been developing an idea that people should be empowered to work from wherever they're at, right? Not wherever they live, but from wherever they are, whether it's a hotel or the beach or whatever. And so having secured systems, having secured networks, having frictionless two-factor when they log in, those were all important. That's what enabled us to pivot almost immediately, because we saw the need for that, not because we saw pandemic. Now, from a productivity standpoint, we monitor that stuff. I talked about that. We were looking at tickets, the time it takes for closures, the amount of volumes, the number of stories created in Jira, how much code has been, refined or produced. What does the agile process look like? We're measuring all that. Productivity's through the roof. Now, from a long-term standpoint, you have to change how you work. And what that means is 9 to 5 is irrelevant now, right? Are you there when your customers need you, right? Are you available when you need to collaborate? But if you start at 10 and you end at 4, so be it. If you start at 6 and you end at 7 at night, so be it. The idea is, let's focus on productivity and results, rather than this 20th century archaic vision that I have to see you in order to think you're doing your job.
Yeah, we went out March 16th. I don't think I'll ever forget that day either. Before COVID, we had about 25% of our workforce working remote. We now have 100%. About 2 months ago, Chattanooga allowed offices to open. We asked our employees, are there employees who would like to come back to the office? We had 2 who said they needed to. And that was more because of family situation than anything to do with technology. I think we've managed the team two ways. One, we started a practice of calling employees twice a week. One phone call was dedicated to nothing but how are you and your family doing? It had nothing to do with work at all. The second call was to get a status, but we've measured productivity basically through our PMO, the number of how well we're doing on our sprints, and just looking at the workload. Basically, I think IT's always been fairly easy to manage. Are you producing? Are you meeting the deadlines? Are you actually delivering the products that and on the things that you promised to deliver? The general feeling is, not just for me, but from the whole C-level, that IT and the entire organization is more productive than it was when it was actually in the office. I do think that we've had to kind of remind people that it's okay to stop, that it's okay to shut down at night, be with your family. And like some have mentioned, I think we've actually been in, it's time for you to take some time off. I think people are, because they think, I can't go anywhere, I don't need time off, but people really need it.
Yeah. Well, excellent thoughts. Obviously, interesting time for all of us, and so many different angles that we can take this, these questions, and always a good sign when there's lots to talk about. We are going to close it for now. Certainly appreciate all of our panelists and their thoughts and experience that they brought to the table for us. Thank you for the audience for being involved today. We will have a recording available that will be emailed out to each one of our attendees after the fact, so please feel free to share that. And once again, appreciate your time and willingness to be involved with this Tier 4 webinar today. Thanks so much.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.